So hi everyone, welcome to Using AI for Digital Background Checking and Take Safer Decisions Quickly. I'm here today with 321 Go Check, who are a background checking company and part of Microsoft Founders Hub. We have Nurup Naimji, who is the CTO of the organization, here with us today, and he's going to share some details about how 321 are using amazing AI services. Hi Nurup, so we're going to have a real great interesting conversation around 321 check. So first of all, I've got the first question is, if you look at the business problems that AI startups face today, what do you think are the key things that AI can help solve in startups?
In terms of our company 321 Go Check, using AI is a game changer because for the past 20 years or so, background checking has been pretty static. There hasn't been really much changes. We've had the same type of user experience. We've had the same types of checks. But with technology, which is now an inducement for fraud, we also need technology to resolve those types of fraud types problems. And AI helps us do that. And I'm happy to show you how we're doing that, Lee. But in terms
first of all, can you just give us a bit of background, to 321 and the way you're approaching the current issues within the market for this solution?
Absolutely. So I'll go to a document I've shared. I've got on here. Hopefully you can see it. So the big problems around background checking centers around key metrics: speed, security, accuracy, and user experience. Speed in terms of should not take 5 weeks to do a check. Security in terms of data should not be scattered all over the place. Accuracy in terms of there's a lot of room now for fraud to take place where documents can be easily forged. User experience in terms of you want your candidates who's part of this onboarding journey to actually feel part of the checking process. And if the checking process is good with the candidate, they're automatically starting to feel integrated with the company. And overall, we want the impact to the client to actually be really smooth and easy. So what we're trying to solve then with background checking is trying to improve all of these 5 categories so that the end client, they are viewing background checking as a simple task within their onboarding journey. It's not a critical task that has to get done over a long period of time, but it's just a task that can be done in the same way they send an email. They can just do a background check using our solution, and it doesn't take lots of time. In terms of our approach, Lee, I think it's worthwhile just mentioning quite quickly why AI is impactful or it can be impactful for companies like ours that are using it to help clients. We want to make sure that at the data level, we've got that right. We want to make sure at the regulation level, we're following all of the rules, not only Microsoft AI rules, not only UK AI rules, but because we're a global company, we actually need to be really aware of global AI rules. Now, if we can show that we've got control over our data and we can demonstrate that we've got control over the regulation in as much as we're auditable, we can follow Microsoft best practices, then with AI, we can overlay our AI technology using Microsoft AI solutions, and then it makes it easier for us to deliver a really good product. Does that make sense, Lee?
It does, yeah. So I think, the key thing around 321's approach then is, number one, it's a service which allows to do that background checking of someone who wants a service. So whether that's rental agreement or whether it's finance agreement. And then your principles are really looking at the fairness, reliability and trustworthiness of the AI solution that you're using. Because if you think about that process today, for many organizations, it's a paper-based audit. So someone submits an application form, the application form is then checked. There's that human interaction process. So what you're doing is replacing a lot of that with an AI solution, but ensuring that the compliance is there from regulation, trustworthiness, etc. That, there isn't that bias. I think that, that's the key thing I'm really excited about with your solution is, you're trying to remove as much as you can from bias and impact, but also look at the governance of the solution. So, from an AI perspective, how is this helping improve your service and offering?
So really appreciate you going back and talking a bit more about the background checking problem. I'll show you a quick demo, Lee, of how this is impacting clients, the candidates themselves, and actually us as a provider. So we are a multi-product, multi-country background checking solution, and our solution was built from scratch. And we are offering about 80 different types of checks. We've got half checks that are traditional checks, and then the other half are more modern types of checks. And those modern types of checks are things like stacking up data, where we can make sure that the data that's been submitted is consistent. The other types of modern checks that we're doing, which AI helps us to deliver, are checks around, say, for example, adverse media, internet search, social media. So what we want to do then is take in more data, stack them up, and then present that back to our end clients so they can see an overall picture of their client or of their candidate. Before, it was just taking some information and making a binary decision. But AI is allowing us to do a lot more. Take in more data, stack it up, build a profile, and our clients then can decide whether or not the overall profile makes sense for their organization. In terms of specific benefits, I'll share my screen here, Lee, if you don't mind. So here, I've got on our screen this is what our clients would see. They have the ability to choose whether or not they're a landlord, choose whether or not they want to use our employer flow. They can choose a package, they can create a package, or they can just use a previous package. So in terms of what we've built, we're giving our end clients the ability to make a lot more decisions when it comes to how they want their services. Now, say, for example, we've got a client who've already selected an order with us. So imagine you, Lee, right? You're on your way to London. You've got a hiring decision to make. Last week, you're supposed to hire Tom. So you put a request with us, right? A background checking request with us. But on your way to work on a Monday morning, you want to know what's the status of that order. You want to make sure Tom is able to start working next week, but you don't want that long email chain. So wouldn't it be nice just to be able to place a request verbally where you say, what is the status of order 940, right? So on your phone, you can just verbalize a request to find out the status of an order. And I'm hoping this works, right? So this example here shows, assuming order 940 is for your employee who's supposed to start working with you next week, you can see right now that your candidate, Tom, he's already done the submission. We've already completed the checking. And we can see that the report status is not ready. So in a few seconds, you can see, Lee, quite quickly the status on a potential candidate that's supposed to start work next week, right? So, and that for us is saving clients a lot of time. Normally, clients would have to go to the office, send an email, we receive that email, then we would have to go and investigate the status of that order, and then we'd have to send a response back to the client. Now, that normally used to be a 24-hour process. So what we've done here is we have actually reduced this to seconds. Another example would be, say, for example, your landlord, right? So one of the key metrics landlords use to decide whether or not a candidate will be good to rent a property would be how much income they make, right? So I can just type in a request here. So so I can type in a request, for example, does Nurup, right? Nurup, Nurup, Naimji, Rye. So let's have an income over £1,000, right? So in this instance, I can verbalize it or I can type it in. So that request is going through and I'm not sure, right? So here is another use case if you're a landlord where the landlord, the key metric they're going to need to make a decision on whether or not a candidate could be good for renting a place would be income. So within a few seconds, we are exposing a specific part of our database to the landlord, where they can verbalize the request or they can type it in. And in this instance, in a few seconds, you can see that the landlord gets confirmation that this candidate, me, makes over £1,000 a month, and then they can make that decision. So at the client level, on the employer side, we're allowing HR organizations to get a really, really clear status on where they are with their candidates at the onboarding level. On the landlord side, we're giving landlords the ability to make really, really quick decisions on key metrics regarding income. Now, AI is also impacting us as an organization, right? Because for me, I want to be able to make decisions on whether or not there are lots of orders available, right? So if we've got lots of clients, and if all of a sudden we've got lots of orders that are not being processed, I want to know about that. So using the same AI capability, I can acting as a CEO of a company, I can simply find out, how many orders, are in status, say for example, completed. COM, right? So, and I'm hoping I get the responses, which tells me how many, right? So as a CEO of a company, I'd want to make sure that all these 14 orders here, they are being attended to. So this basic NLP, natural language processing capability using AI, allows us to help our clients. It helps landlords, but at the organization level, 3, 2, 1, go check. I also know how many orders are open, how many orders are completed. So this is a basic starting point for us using AI to help our clients. Does that help, Lee?
Yeah, that really helps. So first of all, 3, 2, 1 check is really looking at two primary stakeholders. So it's either an employee vetting a candidate or a landlord vetting someone who wants to lease or rent a property. And you have AI models built for each of those scenarios, which do that background check-in, validation, etc. But then you're overlaying on top of that a virtual agent, which then assists the person, whether it's the candidate themselves or whether it's the company who's doing the background check, well, not the company who wants to do the background check on the user, to validate the status of their current request. So you're using the same data infrastructure, but you're using RAG and you're using OpenAI services to then bring back appropriate responses to the different stakeholders. It's really cool, really cool. So, one of the things that you showed us there was, you're logged in and you are an admin of the system, of course. So, what do you see as the potential risks and challenges of implementing AI within startups today?
So it's a really, really big question. When we started off this journey, Lee, and I want to go back and I want to show you another bigger capability we've implemented using AI, and that's on the checking side, right? I think that is when I show you what we're doing on the checking side, it will really show you how AI has evolved. And in terms of the challenges, when we started off this journey, we started off maybe 3 years ago, and we were using machine learning, PyTorch and TensorFlow to train models to extract data. But 3 years ago, it was so expensive and time consuming. Now, when Microsoft came out with its AI capabilities, we obviously had to understand how that could impact our clients. And one of the goals we were always after is, how can we deliver a one-click checking solution? And that one-click checking solution, it would mean, assuming you've got your data in place, assuming, you know all the regulations that you have to follow, that one-click checking solution, you have to know the amount of AI capabilities that's on offer. So one of the biggest challenges we had then was, well, how do we use our data? to implement a model that works. And at the time when AI came out, there were so many different models, right? We could have used which language model do you use? Do you use, what kind of document analyzers do you use? What we were doing was we were taking in text data, video data, we were taking in images, we were taking in documents. So the AI solution we needed had to account for all of those inputs. And in the end state, we want to make sure that whatever we implemented, it could be scalable. In the end, we assessed about 3 or 4 different solutions. And for us, the best solution then was to be able to take all of those inputs, and then we used a combination of solutions. We use document analyzer. We use a lot of pre-trained models rather than trying to train things ourselves. At the company level, we established what models were best for us, and then we chose OpenAI. What trained models were available, so we investigated those, identified the most stable of those trained models. We implemented those, and then one of the other challenges was around costs, right? So not only at the company level, choosing what models and what open libraries we can use, but also the costs. So once we started to feel comfortable around the models that were available, and then we implemented those, then slowly we started to see how the costs were increasing over time. And then once we got better visibility in terms of the cost, i.e., do we use ChatGPT 3.5, the 4K model? Do we use ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo 16? Do we use ChatGPT 4? So we were able to monitor our costs by implementing various models over time and then seeing the results. So one of the other challenges with that approach was it took a bit longer, but then we understood a bit more how we needed to optimize our prompting so that we got the best responses. And if you don't mind, I'll give you an example, Lee. So when we started off, we chose ChatGPT 3.5 4K, but we found out the token size was too small. So the request was actually, all of the requests was not going through. So when we got the responses, we got responses that were unpredictable. So it was a trial and error for us in terms of which model to use, how to manage costs, which open source library to use. But over time, I think we're refining more and more to the stage where we're understanding where the constraints are. We're understanding more and more our data, and we're understanding more and more what our clients are expecting from us. Does that answer your question, Lee?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I'd love to see like a more like in-depth demo then of that example of how you've implemented those models.
So before I go into that, I'll give you a practical example then, Lee, right? So I've got on my screen here a bunch of checks, right? So this is what we're trying to solve for our client. So I know I'm scrolling quite quickly.
Yeah, and these were previously like all manual, paper-based.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So I will show you the manual way eventually, but let's just go straight into how AI is helping us. So our goal is to get to one-click checking. And by one-click checking, literally having clients click one button and everything is done. AI brings us a lot closer to that. Now, here's an example of how one-click checking can be powerful. So for example, I want to do an address check. And say, for example, I want to do, say, an education, right? An education check. Now, the one-click checking solution would actually allow us to group all of these checks where you just click a button and then we have AI running in the background and it's doing all of these checks for us, right? So these 2 checks here, this one-click checking approach, you've got 31 checks that make up this. And as you can see the clock here, normally if we were to do this manually, this would actually take us about 30 to 40 minutes. And this 30 to 40 minutes actually would cost us maybe around, I'd say, 15 to 20 pounds. With AI, right, it's running through this in probably based on previous examples, it normally does these 31 checks in less than a minute. And for us, this is actually a cost of less than £1. So the savings are incredible. The speed is actually incredible, but more importantly for us is also the accuracy. So I'll click continue here. Right, so you can see 13 were passed on the address check, and then we've got 4 on the education check were unsure. So one of the rules we must follow at the EU level and at the UK level is that AI should never make a decision on a human being, right? So, and that we would never allow our checking process to follow AI's final decision. But what does that mean? It means we always have the ability to intervene, right? So we can always step in to find out whether or not this makes sense. And here's an example, right? We have the ability to override. Was this personable identify information, was it provided? Right, here we've got a case where it was provided, but our AI prompts indicated that it's unsure. So, but this could be a case of, we've got the date formatting wrong. In this case, we have the ability to override it because the value was supplied, and that would be a pass. And here's another example. Here, the street was provided, but our AI result says it's unsure. And the example here is that there's no context for this. And we're going now into AI world where you need to set a context. And within that context, you create a prompt, and the prompt then is based on the context that you set. So the AI response here is, this context doesn't make sense. And for us, this is really, really great, because then the next stage for us would be then to go back and refine our prompting using various solutions. It could be Microsoft Prompt Flow, or it could just be another solution that we build to iterate so that the next time we run this check, this becomes a pass. So here I can intervene at the checking level, and I can go and I can pass that. And it's the same thing then also with the education check. So we've got a question here, and this question becomes, for our viewers, this question becomes our prompt. It is actually our business logic, which we've converted to our prompt, which then becomes actually quite dynamic. So over time, we're going to iterate so that we've got more confidence in the results that are being generated, but equally, we can still step in to find out whether or not we agree with the AI results. So at every stage in this process, we're able to audit the final outcome. We're never relying solely on AI to make all of these decisions. So sorry, go ahead.
And that's a brilliant example of responsible AI. You've designed a system that needs to be, responsible. It needs to adhere to regulations and standards. You need that man in the middle approach to do the validation. And what you've done as well, which I really like, is the questions that are coming back for the auditor to check are re-injectable prompts. So they can, once you have that system refined more and more, the system one check will become more and more important. And I think this really feeds into the measures of impact of AI. Your demo when you started off around just running that checking process, as you said, that would have took 30 minutes at least to do it in the past if it was manual. Again, was it legible? Was it scanned? Was it, what format was it in? Are all more complexities. And to get that in now 44 seconds is a huge, huge saving in terms of AI. So I think that's a really great demo in just showing the power of what AI can do in terms of automation.
So it really is, Lee. It's for us, it's massively impactful. So we've got a check here, right? Here's for us, here's a real power of AI, where before, for a human being to do a check involving lots of dates and lots of processing, lots of image, it was nearly impossible. So AI allows us now to bring in dates from employment, dates from where you've lived, dates from your education, and AI then, we can do something called a consistency check. I'm going to run this now, Lee. I'm not sure what the result will be, but I'll run it now so you can see. Right. So the consistency check then is making sure all the data, all the dates across a period makes sense. So if you told me, Lee, you're working for Microsoft and you're in London and you have been with Microsoft for the past 3 years, but equally, if I'm doing a background check on you and you said you were studying in Belgium and you were there also for the past 3 years, but if also you told us you were living, say for example, in Delhi in India, AI allows us to stack up all of that data to see if it makes sense. So
it's a good old issue of gaps, isn't it? That, from a recruiting perspective, that, as you say, oh, there's a big gap in this person's CV. What happened during this period, or did they just forget? So yeah, that's a great example.
And it's not just with the dates, it's also with images. So what we're finding, because of remote hiring, organizations will be trusting companies like ours to make sure that candidate, their profile is consistent across many, many platforms. So we can take your image from your passport and we can compare that not only against your driving license or an image on your CV, but we can compare that image against LinkedIn or any other image we may find on the web. And that's not to make people feel uncomfortable about us using data. It's actually to make employers feel comfortable that your image, we can process the various images that we find to make sure it's consistent so that employers are comfortable that what you've presented yourself as a candidate, it makes sense. So an AI is allowing us to take in not only the dates across different types of checks, but also images across different locations and different formats to make sure it all stacks up. So I'm going to go back here now and see how we're progressing with this consistency check. Now, this is taking a bit longer, right? And don't be afraid that this is taking longer. A human being, if we were to do this particular consistency check, it would probably take us 5-6 hours. And in fact, most companies don't even do a consistency check for the simple reason that it takes so long. When we started off this journey trying to do a consistency check, you'd have to write down all of the dates, you'd have to write down all of the locations, and you'd have to have a conversation with a colleague to make sure you're not making any errors. But with this, we're able to allow AI to process the data in a safe way where we can audit the output in a secure way where we know the data is stored in one location, but equally important, I think, in a consistent way, in a consistent auditable way. One of the challenges background checking companies have is how to process lots of data, and that problem goes away with AI. Right. So here it's taken 3.5 minutes to do a consistency check on maybe at say 50 data points, Lee, right? So if I click continue, again, I'm not sure, right? So it's come back with one unsure. Let's take a look at that. Is candidate in 2 different locations for the same date period using submitted documents and actual values submitted by the candidates, right? So we're trying to find out whether or not a candidate has been in multiple locations. So, and it's not sure, right? So if I come back here now, then show more. So for some reason, there's been an inconsistency in terms of the candidate being in different locations, right? So it hasn't come back with a pass. It's actually come back with an unsure. So I'd have to go back now into more details about why there's an inconsistency. But if I go back to one of the pass, you could see the data regarding date of birth is consistent across all the documents that we received. Now, we can review that document, and then we'd be able to validate whether or not that's whether or not that's true. But in terms of the true power of AI, it's being able to process so much data. And I'll show you what that looks like, Lee. Let me just show you what that looks like. Right. So what does that look like then in terms of the report? Let me just filter back here. So here's what one of the reports then would look like. And Lee, interject at any point here in case.
Yeah, and again, this just just thinking about that example, this could be an established person with a 10-year career who's lived in 3 different countries, who's done multiple different types of jobs. And again, if you're going through that reconciliation,
yes,
just to even check someone's LinkedIn profile takes a good amount of time.
So, and here is what that report would look like. So we're taking the data and we want to present it back to our client. And on the employment side, you can see this person has worked over this period, right, which is coming out to over about 2,000 days. And then the liveness test, here's their address. So over the address they've worked, they've lived in London over that same period. But here's a consistency check. In this instance, you can see this person is studied in Canada, and here's probably why it's failed or why it's unsure. They've studied in Canada, London, and they've worked and they've lived in London, England over that same period of time. Now, I was expecting to see some kind of error here because there was one unsure. But the consistency check in this instance, it's taken all the data, it's stacked it up so that the end client can see quite clearly that candidate's journey over a period of time. If there was a massive failure, if there was a fail, then you would see on this graph that there was a fail, i.e., as you mentioned, the gap check. If the gap check could not be explained, the candidate or the client would both see there's a gap for which it's not explained, and the AI would flag that up. I think because it was unsure, that's why it's not showing up here.
And so, this could be as simple as because it's London for both locations, but 2 different countries with the name of London.
So do you know what? So that's a really, really good point, Lee. And so it's one of the challenges we're finding with using OpenAI is now the subtleties of the responses. We're finding that if we get the dates wrong, it comes up as unsure. If we get a spelling wrong, it actually comes up as unsure. If we get an email wrong, it comes up as unsure. Now, and that's actually really, really good for us because it is a first protocol for us to understand whether or not the quality of the data meets our standards. Now, and it's not necessarily at the prompt level where it could be a problem. It actually could be at the candidate level where maybe the candidate's given us the wrong information and we haven't picked it up. But at the prompt level, when we're doing the final checks, we then get to go back and verify whether or not, is it the candidate problem? Is it the prompt problem? Is it a context problem? And actually, is it the language model problem? And you asked a question earlier on in the journey, what are the challenges? So one of the, not challenges, I would say, but the way forward for us is now that we've implemented these AI models, is how then do we refine it to make it better and better? Because as an organization, we want to be able to help enterprise clients. We want to be able to scale our product. And part of that scalability would be able to dynamically modifying our prompt so that we trust it more and more, but while not compromising on safety and security.
Yeah, honestly, and that's like the perfect answer to the ethical considerations of using AI and the things that you need to take account in when implementing an AI solution. So I think you've answered that really well. You cannot just trust the AI system.
No.
The AI system has to be validated. It has to be responsible. It has to work in terms of data. It has to work in terms of governance or regulation authority. So I think that's a great example of where those checks are needed, but then the enhancement of the service will just reduce the number of the unknown knowns as such.
Yes.
So I think it's a great example. So honestly, Nurup, I think it's a great example. I'm really impressed with 321 Check and the work that you're doing with AI services. And you're now a level 4 Microsoft startup, which is amazing, with Microsoft Founders Hub. So just for everyone else's knowledge, we do have a service called Microsoft Founders Hub, which Nurup and 321 are part of. If you're interested in becoming a Microsoft startup, we have access to cloud credits, so both Azure cloud credits and OpenAI cloud credits, and our partner cloud credits for the use of AI services on the cloud platform. We also have like expert networking sessions and meetups, and we also have the opportunity to present at events such as this or events and conferences around the globe. So if you are interested in joining Microsoft Founders Hub, please click on the QR code. Nurup did this a few years ago and look at where they are now. So huge thank you for Nurup and the team at 321, and I wish you every success in the future going forward. Thank you for joining us today.
Lee, thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to comment quickly on the Founders Hub. I think the Founders Hub, for those who are thinking of starting, a startup, especially involving AI, the Founders Hub is a great way to start building something involving AI. We started off with level 1 a few years ago, and the confidence I've had with working with the startup program is month on month, it's just increasing and increasing on the basis that we've had amazing people to help us along the journey. It's not just us having to guess what do we do next. It's a case of going to the network and speaking to experts to find out what are the best practices here, not only from a technical point of view, but also from a legal point of view. So having access to that network has really, really helped us. But I think more importantly for me was, how do we now go to the next level? It's not just trying to achieve now, but what happens after you go past level 3. And for us, now that we're in level 4, the Founders Hub is amazing because now I know the resources I have available to us to help us scale, at the sales level. So the journey is amazing in the Founders Hub, not only at the starting of the journey, but throughout the whole journey in terms of what your overall goals are. And that for me has been the biggest source of confidence I've had with being part of the Founders Starter Program.
Huge thank you, Nurup. And again, we wish you every success in the future.
Lovely. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, team.